All right. Good morning, Lauren, again, and good morning, Nicola Lemon from KPMG. How are you?
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So our last podcast, we said that we might have a very special guest in the next episode, and we were referring to you,
Oh my
Nicola,
God.
and here you are. So thank you so much for joining us. And I'd love to sort of give you the chance to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about, Nicola in a minute or two or less about who you are and your background and what you're passionate about.
All right. Thank you. Nicola Lemon. I'm currently the National Social and Affordable Housing Lead at KPMG, and I've been there for just under a year now. I'm a partner. Prior to that, I was the CEO at Hume Community Housing for 15 years, and at Hume Community Housing, relevant for here. While I was there, we won a tender with New South Wales Government to take over the property and tenancy management of their disability group homes. New South Wales Government disbanded their disability team and outsourced the property and tenancy management to the sector. And we partnered at Hume with Life Without Barriers and Northcott, and they were the SIL provider, and we provided the tenancy and property management. Yes, lots of learnings through taking on that transfer. And then since I joined KPMG, a lot of the work I've been doing, which has been great and really interesting, is working with SIL providers to help them understand their property and tenancy management skills and the property portfolio, and helping them do options analysis really for divestment of those portfolios of
Wow. Okay.
properties.
Excellent. And we
That's
we
right up our lane,
yeah,
Nicola. That's right. Loz,
yeah.
sorry.
No, that's okay. I was just going to say, I think what sparked our interest in having more conversations with you was your experience across not only the housing sector, but specifically in the disability part of the housing sector. And I know Hume has gone on to have quite a specific SDA portfolio and
Yeah.
start really developing more community, social and affordable housing as well as SDA. Your depth of knowledge is outstanding, and we're excited to unpack that and see where this goes, because at the moment in the industry with the review recommendations, which we're all sort of swirling around and wondering who's gonna do something about it. You're really right in the middle there and trying to offer that advice to the SIL providers to sort of say, hey, you need to have a look at your strategy around housing, and how you can really, make the right decision here in terms of who's managing it, who's doing the supports, do you reinvest, do you get rid of it, what's the best use for this housing, and how can you make the most of it.
That's right.
So yeah, very excited to unpack with you.
Great.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Now we sort of met in a professional sense just a few weeks back, when Disability Housing Solutions was just supporting some inquiries you had from a CHP looking at this very thing, and we're just giving you some market feedback. And it's great
Yes.
to sort of see that the industry's now, there's early adopters now understanding this. As Lauren said, with all of the separation of supports that the agencies top down putting pressure on all the providers about. And then there's the bottom up pressures, the squeeze from just the market and all cost of living and rising rents and power and all the rest of it. We see and we speak with SIL organisations all over, a lot in Queensland, but all over the country, who experience this squeeze, this bottom top squeeze about agency pressures and market pressures. And sitting back as a sort of as a person on the outside of the SIL, we're not a SIL, we're an SDA provider, but we're experts around property and understanding costs and managing homes. And a lot of our board of directors have development experience. We really get it quite at the granular level. And we can see these as observers looking in, you guys are mad for trying to maintain a property portfolio when there's an option to get into accommodation that does the heavy lifting for you. You can lower staff costs, you can eliminate property costs. There's so many
Yeah.
benefits, and we've been beating this drum for a while. And I think maybe you're seeing it at a higher level than we are with the larger organisations, where some of the SILs we work with, they might be handling 20 to 150 clients type numbers, and you're dealing in the thousands.
Yeah.
But you're just adding zeros. The scale doesn't eliminate the problem.
Yeah.
But what are you seeing? Like, how much can you talk about, what you're seeing with these NFPs and CHPs and SILs who are starting to understand I can get out of property, and what's the reasons they're understanding for that?
So what's been really interesting, so obviously don't want to identify clients and need to be careful, to maintain confidentiality. But I've worked with 6 different organisations now who are looking to do something with their property portfolio and understand it better. So I can talk generally, and each of those organisations have chosen different options. Have made different strategic decisions. So it's been interesting to see across the board the different ways it's been approached by different organisations. I think the starting point has been for all of those organisations, myself and my team have done what we've called a current state assessment. And that's been really enlightening for SIL providers, no matter what size they are. Most SIL providers, or the ones I've worked with, do not have a handle on things like property condition, ongoing maintenance liabilities, don't have strategic asset management plans, and in some instances also don't really understand tenancy management and housing rights around tenancy management and obligations. And none of me saying that is not to be critical. It's just not their core business. They're brilliant at the SIL provision, really good at that, and they just don't have the expertise and capability within their business in property and tenancy management. I mean, to varying degrees, different organisations have invested different amounts in building that capability in their organisation. But also that needs to include, if you're going to do it properly, as you know, it needs to include systems and processes and people. And these organisations are not in a position strategically to invest in that level of competency and skill and systems and processes. Their focus rightly is on providing the support services to the people that they serve. And so when I've done the current state assessments, what's been really interesting is that many of the organisations haven't actually taken out their property line of business from a financial perspective. So they haven't done an assessment of what is this actually costing us to be a property and tenancy manager. Because of all, especially in the group home setting, because of the SIL dollars that are coming in, they're pretty positive. So they kind of offset some of the negative financial impact that the property portfolio is having. And when I've been pulling that out on behalf of the client, they've been surprised at the amount that they're actually losing on the property portfolio. And that's without actually even understanding the maintenance liability. I'm just going, the average property of this size would cost you this over this period of time. That's without actually getting into a lot of this legacy stuff that is not fit for purpose, that isn't helping the customers that are living there. There's a range of issues around that. And SIL providers many of the SIL providers don't really have their eyes open around that property obligations and financial commitment that they're making without really understanding the negative
I really get it. And I guess as a SIL, every single hour that you spend in property and tenancy management, they're non-billable hours. So that's 100% cost. And if you're not incorporating that into your it's not even a loss leader, because you don't need to do it, I guess, but it's just cost.
And I think the other thing that's been surprising to me is there are some providers that have arrangements as well with community housing providers, but they're still, again, those arrangements where they've got, service level agreements, they're not being managed effectively either. And that's putting more pressure back onto the SIL provider to understand property obligations, because then they can manage that contract better. So even where they have considered or taken some steps to outsource, that outsourcing hasn't been done effectively and still puts pressure on them as well. So, you know, it's not just the decision to divest or outsource, it's also how well you do that and who you partner with and choosing the right partner to get that right.
What are some of the solutions that are coming up? Like as you go through and you do this current state assessments and they go, oh wow, that's the cost of this activity, and then what are they coming up with to arrest that expense?
Well, I mean, some of the providers I've worked for, because they've then had their eyes open to where some of the unnecessary expenditure is, I can work with them to say, these are here's some quick wins, here's some low hanging fruit. These are the things that you can change, start doing, to cut some of the costs out. It's really difficult because most SIL providers don't have an effective property management system, so it's really hard for them to track their expenditure on repairs and maintenance, for example, to know
Right.
where
So the
they're
first thing is to get an
duplicating
asset
effort.
register and track your expenses and understand where the
And
money's going
hold
and time.
trades and contractors to account. Again, that skill set's not really there, so that's very difficult.
That's a property management skill set. I mean, that's
Yeah.
not the skill set of your normal support worker, right?
Exactly. And for me, having come from, I spent 25 years in the community housing industry, I see that industry as having housing management professionals with technical skills around property and tenancy management. And you can't expect SIL providers to have technicians in their business in that area because that's not their core business. So none of this is a criticism of the clients that I've been working with. It's just the opportunity and hopefully potential obligation to separate property and tenancy management services from support provision to enable more choice and control, as you know, through the DRC and the NDIS review. That's initiating SIL providers looking at their capability, and they're identifying that, no, this is a difficult area of business. Now, the decisions they're making might be to invest in that, and actually invest in their property line of business, invest in that capability, separate it out into a separate organisation and run their own property and tenancy management services. I think what's interesting is it's not clear yet, is it, that whether their separation is from the board down or whether it's just two separate organisations that can be run by the same board. I think, and because there's that lack of clarity, different organisations are choosing different ways to go about.
Yeah, these are the early adopters, trying to get ahead of it, which I've been so pleased to hear about, because it's a drum we've been beating for a little while. And I think originally when we spoke, it was about those same things, about saying, look, we've identified here that the community housing, or generally the ones we've been speaking with, the larger SIL providers, unpacking their property portfolio and going, hey, the recommendation is suggesting that you separate this out. We'd be happy to be the property managers for your portfolio and separate out that support and housing. But it started to become quite evident to them that, yes, it was a financial sort of loss leader and difficult to unpick. I think it was a complication of salt and pepper leases with government sort of departments and all sorts of things. That was really quite difficult and quite historical too. So some of them were very old, very hard to understand, very hard to get out of. So it's not only that separation of the portfolio and the management of it, but it's the opportunity there to sort of look at the stock, these poor performing assets, the legacy and existing stock that really is, not livable and should be looked to either get rid of or redevelop. And that's the other side of this opportunity is what else can they do with that will add to the housing stock on the market and really, give people a better opportunity for accessible living in the SDA standards if they're to develop it as SDA. So I'm really hopeful that is an outcome here, is that the CHPs and SIL providers that have got stock are able to take that financial burden out of the management and use a third party or depending on the separation guidelines that actually come out, however that has to look, but that'll actually allow them to reinvest the profit from their other businesses into developing more housing stock, which
Yeah.
is really what we're all trying to achieve.
And I think that's the motivator for SIL providers, and this is where I admire them. What they're actually thinking about is this property fit for purpose for the customers that live there? It's supposed to be their home, and it's supposed to assist independence, not hinder independence. And I think, trying some of the providers I'm working with are looking at divestment opportunities that enables institutional capital to come in, and an expert in development that'll be able to renew, knock down and rebuild and make these homes fit for purpose. And my understanding is that whilst we don't have formal evidence yet across the sector, just chatting to the SDA Alliance the other day, we were talking about the outcomes then for the SIL provider once the customer's housed in a fit for purpose home that actually assists their independence. The SIL provider can actually be more efficient because they don't have to provide as much support
100%.
because the customer is more independent. I mean, and isn't that what it's all about at the end of the day?
Yeah, and again,
yeah.
this is the drum that we've been beating for quite a while in trying to say to the SIL, we've got all of these homes. The home does the heavy lifting. You can lower your staff hours because you don't need as many people in the house. Which is better for the participant not to be crowded with support workers. And we can also move entire households with Appendix H provisions. Now, a lot of SILs don't understand Appendix H provisions. Often we have conversations where we explain this. It's like we've invented fire. They're like, what? You can do what? Which means a whole house. If there's a whole happy house, we can move the whole happy house into a brand new, near new SDA that provides the independence that we're all trying to achieve. Now, so that's great. So you said some of the decisions that they make as a SIL, and I do want to talk quickly about CHPs as well, but just to quickly finish up the SIL. So some of them decide to invest into a property management division, which I assume you need a certain scale of SIL to do that because it all is expense. What are some other choices that they're making once you lay out after the current state of affairs assessment?
Yeah, so there tends to sort of be about six options in the options analysis, which is the next phase after the current state assessment. So, there's a status quo, stay as you are until this is mandated, get some of those low-hanging fruit and try and make it a little bit more efficient. There's invest in your property and tenancy management capability and set it up as a separate subsidiary of the company. There is outsource through head lease arrangements or service level agreements to the community housing industry. And that's probably the one that comes out on top when you do a risk and return rating, because it's the lowest risk, really. So you can still own your properties. The boards tend to find, having that, boards are a bit reticent to lower their balance sheet, so they're outsourcing on a long-term arrangement with a preferable partner that is really values aligned and that you're very confident about their skill set. That comes up at the top most of the time, as I say, risk and return. It's the lowest risk. Then there is one of the options I've looked at for a couple of the providers is fully divest. So get rid of all of your assets, enable the incoming party that's a consortium of a capital provider and an SDA, tenancy and property manager, and do the redevelopment and have a program of redevelopment across that portfolio. And you hope that as a SIL provider, you can continue to provide the SIL. But again, this is something boards have really got to consider because of the pressures elsewhere in the NDIS pricing. Lots of SIL providers are under significant pressure, and then to put at risk income through a divestment opportunity is a difficult hurdle for some boards to get over. Necessary, I would argue, but difficult. And I understand why that's difficult. So I think that outsourcing is a good sort of interim measure. And then, maybe then they get the confidence to move into the divestment. So you get that
full... baby steps first. So clean up what's not working immediately, because that's ability to carry on, and it should be reasonably quick and easy.
Yeah.
Outsource as your stage 2, and then divest and partner with a development partner that can then, you stay in the house or transition people out
Yeah.
temporarily while the development's done and then move
Yeah.
forward. Yeah.
One of the other options that, I mean, and you can go, some providers have decided to go straight to the divestment.
I was going to ask about that. Are there some boards that are more pragmatic and go, listen, we're going to get there eventually. Let's just rip off the Band-Aid and go?
Yes, yeah,
Yep.
yeah. Whereas others are more cautious, and my observations has been really that's been about the board's appetite for risk and reducing their balance sheet. So the other option, the final one, is really thinking about how the SIL provider can have an investment strategy and utilize those assets to still bolster their balance sheet, but get the right outcomes for the customer and separate their tenancy and property management from their support provision. And, that's looking at kind of aggregated investment vehicles, pooling your assets, drawing on bonds, pooling your assets perhaps with other providers. I mean, this would be something I would love to see happen in the sector. It's happened in the CHP sector because Housing Australia has set up aggregated bond vehicles for the sector. It would be great to see something very similar for SDA properties.
That's like M&A between SILs you're talking about now.
Well, it's more about pooling your assets into an aggregated pool investment vehicle.
Okay.
That sounds really interesting, and
That sounds like a whole other podcast, actually. That's it does.
It sounds like I need to do some industry learning first.
That's actually really juicy. Now, okay, so there's about 6 options. They can invest in a property management. They can do nothing. They can just drive traditional efficiencies, outsource via head lease or service agreement, which is what is the lowest risk and preferable to a lot of providers. The fully divest, straight to rip off the Band-Aid, or an investment and separate services strategy, right? So they're the sort of the 6 options that you're mostly seeing.
Yes.
So that's a lot of that sounds. There's some challenging business conversations for SILs to sort of have amongst themselves. None of that is business as usual, except one of those options, which is do nothing, right? Which is that's like you poke your head in the sand option. So just to appreciate, sitting back and just trying to appreciate that, because again, I'm not a SIL, DHS, we're not a SIL. And I personally do get frustrated seeing some of the decisions they make, and just you laying that out for me now, I've got a little bit more empathy for the considerations that they're dealing with. Certainly, I understand business stress. There's no question about that, but it's good to sort of get that broader insight into some of the specific challenges they're dealing with. In the CHP world, again, we've had discussions about CHPs with a large amount of SDA legacy stock, and for listeners who to get the nuance, legacy stock typically, because it's so old, is now located within that urban creep area. So there's more central locations because of the age of them. And many years ago, blocks were bigger. So they're old, crappy houses, often, on larger blocks closer to the centres of the action. That sounds pretty juicy for redevelopment. And so you're seeing some CHPs now explore, okay, is this a potential knockdown redevelop at a higher density opportunity? Are you seeing that come through the door as well?
Absolutely. I mean, and I think that, so thinking back to my prior experience of taking legacy stock transfers from government of group homes, they're in great locations. There's a real opportunity to renew those properties, and there's density uplift opportunities on a lot of those sites. So, and again, those homes are not fit for purpose. But many of the people that live in them are very happy with where they live, and the area that they live in, and they're well connected, and the people that they live with, and they've lived with them for a long time. So I think there's a balance between the upheaval of redevelopment and decanting, and making sure that people end up back where they want to be, just
Yeah.
with an improved amenity.
I think
Yeah.
this was something we've talked about before, and it was really important making the link for those households that are perhaps a mix of aging, disability, Department of Justice, child safety, like whatever the mix of the household is, that they're happy and they want to stay in that area. And there's likely not to be a new development in that particular area because the cost of investment in those spaces are higher, given that they're usually now very sought after. So it was that unpacking the flexibility in SDA funding for, let's say, one of the tenants to apply and then continue the household living together via Appendix H, which made the investment strategy far more feasible and positively geared. So, unpacking the funding sort of components that can then make a diverse household really work is an excellent way to sort of address those legacy stock areas that could be redeveloped and add more housing to a block that's perhaps only housing 2 or 3 people that could go to, say, 2 or 3 villas on a block, and really make the most of being able to keep those people in that same area, make it feasible and add to the profitability of the investment to be able to go again. It's just it is such a crucial part of making the most of these legacy stock blocks that I think at the moment is just a drain on everyone's resources and not great to live in.
No, that's right. And I think, New South Wales and Victoria sort of stand out because of their portfolios. Victoria has a very well run specialist disability property and tenancy management service that sort of sits slightly outside of Homes Vic. So Homes Vic do the property management, they draw on that, but they have a separate line of business for disability, and so the Vic government have sort of invested in that, whereas in contrast, the New South Wales government just disbanded their whole, it was called ADAC at the time, Aged Care and Disability, and they just disbanded the whole department. So there's not really anybody in Homes New South Wales that's got a history with this property, and it was outsourced really on I think the arrangements were 5+5 on the leases, so they were a 10-year lease. So it's kind of coming to a point where this now needs to be considered, and I know that because it's not just Hume, there were other providers as well. Blue Chip, Home in Place, Bridge Housing and Evolve, I think, were the main CHPs that received that transfer. They, I assume, are now trying to negotiate different lease arrangements with government that will allow redevelopment of that portfolio. And I think that there is an appetite from New South Wales. There's precedent for providing 49-year leases to community housing providers for social and affordable housing or mixed tenure housing. So there is a precedent there that providers can draw on for this portfolio, the group home portfolio.
You don't often hear the words "really well done" and Victoria government in the same sentence. So it's great to hear that. Do you have any insights into Queensland, into the Queensland government, if they have anything like this and how they're doing? Similar to Victoria?
I am not fully across. I haven't worked with any just dedicated Queensland providers, so I'm not fully across it. What I would say is that I can speak to the community housing industry part in Queensland, and the community housing industry in Queensland isn't as mature or as advanced as it is in the sector generally. There are some providers that are big, top 10 providers in Queensland, but the broader sector isn't as mature, and that's because the government haven't seen CHPs in the same way that they have been seen by New South Wales and Victorian governments, and arguably WA governments, as a conduit to be able to provide more social and affordable housing. So the policy settings in Queensland haven't enabled community housing providers to grow with confidence and invest in their growth and capacity. That's changing now, and they've just got a new master agreement. But it's a very different a very different market at the moment.
What I've identified, I've done a lot of work in this space in the past 12 months about SDA as community housing, and what I've identified, and I've sat with the Queensland Housing Minister and had this conversation in his ministerial office with an assistant director general of the department, is that Victoria, New South Wales, Western Australia, South Australia, years ago, they've accepted that SDA housing is social housing. It's under the same definition. It meets the definition in those states of social housing. How they interact with that is all a little bit different with their policy, but broadly, SDA is social housing. Queensland, as far as I'm aware, is the only state in the country that doesn't accept that SDA is social housing. So the CHPs can't get grants. They can't, and it's specific, and I could cite a couple of specific projects that have been funded through CHPs that have SDA components, where the grants have specifically stated that the SDA component of this grant is excluded from the funding, specifically excluded.
Yeah, well,
So
Definitely.
the new minister, Sam O'Connor, is a nice guy. He's really, I think he's genuine. I think he's earnest. I laid this out. He's gone, well, that seems to meet the definition of social housing, and I believe they're looking into that to adjust the definition, which would then help unlock SDA under the new master agreement for CHPs to go for grants and fund it.
yeah, I think, the advent of the new master agreement is definitely something that should accelerate the growth of providers there and their ability to invest in, the diverse housing continuum, which is normally what community housing providers' strategies are. But they've been held back. I mean, I did some work for Chia Queensland on the principles for the master agreement, and spent some time interviewing CHPs, Queensland CHPs. And they've had a rum deal, really, in terms of funding arrangements, and they've had to return funds, and there's been a lack of investment in that sector historically, through both colours of government, really.
Yeah.
Queensland.
Yeah.
So I think it's harder for them to pick up the SDA stuff.
I don't think it's fair to sort of blame one team or the other in government. I think there's decades of this, and they've all had a chance to sort it out. So I'm pleased that at your level, having had input to this master agreement, it's really reassuring to hear that you think it's a good agreement and it's a way forward and it's going to unlock housing. That's really good to hear.
I think the providers are happy with where they've landed. It could always be better, but it's a great start.
Can I ask you one question, Nicola? If you were to suggest one piece of advice to a SIL provider with a portfolio that they're wondering what to do with, they've got their head in the sand at the moment, and if you were to bring this up with them, what would be the one thing you would suggest that they consider?
Look, I think for me the biggest thing is helping SIL providers recognise that there is a technical capability required in providing property and tenancy management, and that if you don't have that capability, you will lose millions of dollars on your portfolio, and potentially you will be at odds with the values and vision of your organisation because you're not adequately upholding the housing rights of those people living in that housing.
Wow,
Amazing.
that's
really powerful.
that's the word I'm looking for. That's a really powerful synopsis. And I think you could translate that to SDA providers. I think there's SDA providers. There's hundreds of SDA providers in the country, little and small. And I think same advice. I think you need that technical knowledge in asset and property management, property legislation, maintenance, all of that to be a good SDA provider.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, look, unless we've sort of gone for almost 35 minutes now, which is a little longer than normal, but this has been really juicy, and I'd love to dive back into that topic we discussed earlier another time. But Nicola, is there anything else you'd like to say before we tie up?
Oh, no, good. Just thank you for having me. It's been great to have the chat, and I'm really looking forward to continuing to work with you guys.
Excellent.
Absolutely.
And Lauren, anything from you?
No, I'm pleased that we're all pretty much on the same page, and it's really great to have other, passionate and very much experienced individuals really pushing this agenda forward, because I think it's really important for the sector to understand well. So that was why we sort of thought, yeah, we definitely want to get you on here to help spread that news and to help try and connect the dots for people, because it is complex, but it is really important. So thank you. Really appreciate you coming on.
Great. Thank you. It's
Awesome.
been my pleasure.
And look, for me, I'm leaving this podcast today, Nicola, with a greater understanding of the challenges of SIL providers, which is really useful for a guy like me who's trying to engage with SIL providers and talk about how we can work together and provide a better service when we join forces. So thank you. If you're a SIL or a CHP out there and you're listening to this, we really do want to listen and understand your challenges and work together to solve them as an industry, not just as a siloed business. So, Nicola, thank you so much. Looking forward to work with you as well. Lauren, thank you. And
All
until
right.
next time, see you guys.
Great. Cheers.
Excellent.
Bye.
Thank you, guys.